Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
Brian and Brian with you this morning, 8:37 on the line. Our good friend Larry KUDLOW. And Larry, I want to get right to something that I read the other day that sort of caught my eye and ear, mainly because I'm going to be going there ere long. I'm going to China next month on a personal visit. And one of the things I saw is that the Chinese premier there has said that they're going to lower the target for growth from 8% down to 7.5%. They say that exports and real estate are struggling, and if that indeed is the case, that the economy only grows at 7.5%, that would be the slowest pace in some 22 years. I think we would love to have 7.5% growth in this country, but I noticed this put a pall on markets around the world.
Well, yeah, not much here. I mean, stocks were just down a little bit, and I guess there was a little surprise at that announcement. Their usual estimate is 8, and they've notched it down to 7.5. I wouldn't make too much of that, okay? It's an inexact science. I mean, there's no question China has slowed, and they've slowed off their real estate bubble, but they're also been easing their monetary policy, cutting reserve requirements and interest rates. So I wouldn't push the panic button on that. I mean, I think gasoline prices are probably a bigger problem for the U.S. and potential impact on consumer confidence and threatened tax hikes. I mean, I just don't rate that as a gigantic issue. It hit the market, and then it kind of went away.
All right, here's another question. You just mentioned gasoline prices is the one thing that's going to be driving what happens in this country economically for the foreseeable short term. When gas prices go up, are there places that you should look for to make investment, to take advantage of that situation? I hate to be sort of mercenary about it, but after all, we all need to make a buck.
Well, the energy sector, how's that?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
covered there.
It's going to benefit. I want to see. This is tricky business because there's no clear rules here. It depends on the next 50 cents to $1. Okay, you're at, what are you at, 375 now, more or less, nationwide, AAA. Some are close to 4. I guess you've got some that are around even through 4. I think the big question is whether oil prices go to a range of, let's say, $110, $120, in which case you can bet gasoline's going up. How much, you can't be sure. A lot of that has to do with refining capacity and availability of oil, and there's a pipeline problem down in Cushing, Oklahoma that's a big issue. If we had built Keystone, we'd be in much better shape on gasoline prices. But having said all that, it's the next spike that worries me, though there is some indications that consumer real incomes are getting sluggish. Even though jobs are rising, and that's producing income, gasoline prices and zero interest rates for savers are hurting. So we'll have to see how this plays out. I'm not pushing the panic button right now because I think the economy still has pretty good momentum. But let's keep an eye on that. I just think that this is a tricky little period. It's the next move, if it's substantive, that could hurt.
You had Governor Romney on their show last night, right?
Right.
What did you make of the conversation?
Well, I was pretty impressed. I mean, I fired all kinds of questions at him. I mean, he's got one clear message, okay? Lower taxes, economic growth, jobs, debt, smaller government. He refuses to wander off into the wilderness on contraception and other social issues. I mean, he's got his views on religious freedom and so forth, but what did he say? I'm not going to burn my hair. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really is what Romney is all about. He's very impressive with his grasp of detail, and he's got this spiffy new 20% across-the-board tax cut for individual marginal tax rates, which I think helped him snatch victory from the jaws of defeat in Michigan. And my question to him last night was the same thing going to happen today in Ohio. Is your tax cut and your growth plan going to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat? He was down, 10, 12 points to Santorum. Mm-hmm. Now it's a horse race, just about even. And he stayed on message. He said one thing that was quite interesting, though. I asked him about this whole primary process, and he said, look, I said, has it made you tougher? Are you a better candidate? And he said yes. I mean, he talked about it volubly for the first time. And he said he feels he's much stronger, much more prepared to go and take it against Barack Obama when the time comes. And I was very interested in that. He also told me that he would consider, I may have had a little Kudlow input in here.
Oh.
I was the guy pushing pro-growth tax cuts.
So you always said you had to go a little bit steeper or deeper into taxes.
Well, I said, why don't you index the capital gains tax? Index it for inflation. Supply-siders like me have been talking about that. Inflation is a double tax, and capital gains itself is a double tax on corporate income. So it's like a triple tax. Why don't you index capital gains for inflation? And you know what he said? He said, I'm going to look at that. It was very positive. I felt like maybe I had achieved something. I kind of broke through there.
There you go.
So I like that very much. But to my way of thinking, he's got a pretty good message, and we'll see what happens today in Ohio and Tennessee and elsewhere. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, it seems like the polls are indicating that at least the trajectory is towards Romney.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems to be, moving in the right direction at the right time. So I would say that.
What makes me wonder about Santorum, though, still, is if he has any strength, is he's doing well in Texas. He'll do well in Oklahoma. I would suspect he would do well in places like Mississippi and Alabama and a lot of southern states. It'd be interesting to see whether or not, as those states start to unveil themselves, whether he makes a rally.
Well, I think, you have to wait and see before you get to Texas, for example, what happens today. In other words, the events between now and then are going to shape public opinion or shape political opinion.
And there is some indication that a lot of people are sort of getting on the Romney wagon.
Yeah. I mean, he's picking up more support, and should do quite well in Virginia. I mean, it's only him and Ron Paul.
Right.
But I think that's really, today is important, not because he's going to wrap up the delegates. He's not. But it's going to see if he continues his momentum. And I thought the Michigan-Arizona combo last week was very powerful for Mitt. And you could see the lift in the polls in a place like Ohio. So if he wins Ohio, if he wins Tennessee, I'm not that familiar with it, but apparently it's kind of a toss-up now.
Yeah.
That could give more momentum for Mitt in these other states. So I think that's the dynamic, how it plays out.
We'll also have to see what happens with Newt Gingrich. Does he get out of the race after today?
Yeah, well, we'll see. I kind of doubt that he will, but I don't know that with any degree of certainty. The thing that struck me again about Mitt last night is just how knowledgeable the guy is. When you get him one-on-one and, get away from the debate questions and the kind of circus atmosphere, it's so clear whether you like him or not, and I happen to like him. I think he's very good on these issues. He just is knowledgeable. I was talking to him about budget targets and deficit targets and debt targets, and he's gone through his first 100 days and his first term and his second term, and again, I just think that's impressive stuff. He's given a lot of thought to these economic issues. I'm not saying the others haven't, but somehow he seems to go deeper. He seems to have a better grasp of the details, and I'm impressed with that. He's done his homework.
I got the chance to sit with him in the last cycle and for about an hour and sort of with other people, pepper him with questions, and I came away with the same feeling. Guy's got a grasp of detail that's really quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to him, for example, about indexing the capital gains tax, he is aware of the issue. Okay, and I also talked to him about indexing the minimum wage, which I don't like, and he hinted at that a month ago, and some conservatives got on his case.
Right.
But he had an interesting point. He said, well, over a period of time since 1990, even if we had indexed the minimum wage, it'd actually be lower today because of low inflation than it is. I mean, that was interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Right.
So again, it's clear, the guy thinks this stuff through, and he seems to have a strong economic growth and jobs message, and he's not getting bogged down in contraception and other austere social issues.
Larry, we got to run, man.
All right.
Love having you on the show.